Good morning, everybody. Let me show you this new tractor I've got. At the end of the video, I have about 6 minutes of extra content where I share the story of my wife and I picking it up. And I will also tell you what I paid for it. So I hope you stick around for that. That'll be at the end of the video. So first of all, what is this thing? Well, there's a serial number tag up on the dash under there. And then there's another serial number over here stamped on the side of the flange of the block right there. Those serial numbers make this a 1952. And here's just a little bit more information about that. The bottom photo is the serial number on the dash, and the top photo is the serial number from the engine block. 5618730DC. And the numbers are the same. The only anomaly is on the upper photo there where the number 3 should be. It's no longer readable. Anyway, the numbers are the same, so that's really good news. That means this tractor is still original and it's never been engine swapped or anything like that because the numbers match. So when I saw this in the ad, to my untrained eye, I thought it was an SC. But after I've done some research, this is clearly a DC with an adjustable wide front. A few ways you can tell it's a DC versus an SC. Yeah, it's got a cast iron front grille versus a stamped. The location of the headlights are different. The location of the battery is different. There's not a battery in it right now, but the battery sits right there, kind of above everything. I'll show you that later. If you're comparing horsepower, the SC is, in the low 20s, maybe mid 20s, but the DC is in the mid to high 30s. And the other big difference that you can't see with your eyes is the weight. The SC is around 4,000 pounds and the DC is about 5,300 pounds. That is a pretty heavy tractor for the day. And in fact, this is now the heaviest object I've ever put on my trailer since I've owned it. These tractors are actually known for their torque and their pulling ability. I think it's actually rated for a 3-bottom plow. It looks to me like those wheels are pretty darn new. Or new-ish anyway. There's no rust or anything on them. So they were clearly replaced at one point. Both at the same time. They're in the same condition. The tires are also in excellent condition. There's no dry rotting going on. I did find a date code on these tires. It was 2011. So that was 12 years ago now. I guess that might check out if they put new wheels on this 12 years ago and put new tires on it at the same time. That seems like a plausible theory. The front end on this tractor is a little bit unique. I don't know if I would call it rare or not because there's plenty others out there like that. So this is a DC tractor, and there's a few subcategories of the DC. For example, there's a DC3, a DC4, I think a DH. So what is this one exactly? I'm not 100% sure. Some people call it a DC4 with an adjustable front end, and other people call it a DC3 with an adjustable front end. And if you've never seen a front end like this before, this is of course a steering arm. Comes into this knuckle right there. And look how substantial this bar is. It is thick. You can see somebody's already converted this to 12 volt with an alternator. As far as the carburetors go, I think they were either Marvels or Zenith. And normally the Marvel has the company stamping right there on the outside, and I don't see that. So I'm guessing that might be a Zenith, but we'll figure that out later. This is the air intake system, of course. Goes through the hood and runs down through this housing, which must have some sort of other filter element inside there. The other thing that's unique to the DC versus the SC, I think, are these inspection plate covers on the side of the pan. My Farmall regular had inspection plates similar to that. Those are around though, but you don't see these a whole lot, but man, they are pretty handy if you need to get your eyeballs down in there. You can actually see the bottom of the crankshaft and the bottom of the rods, and of course you can look into the oil pan. And it looks like we've got a factory toolbox, which is cool. And even got some stuff in there. keep that in mind for later. So this is the choke on the carburetor. Looks like the previous owner had this twine rigged up. I'll have to figure out what the factory original mechanism was. It probably was some sort of a control rod, because this twine isn't exactly ideal. And as far as the exhaust goes, I noticed this hole the other day after I brought it home. At first I thought that was a failure in the manifold, but I don't think that is. I think that's a factory relief hole for drainage purposes. And we've got a rubber fuel line, and it goes up to our standard sediment bowl. And just glancing at there, that gasoline doesn't look terribly dark. It looks, I wouldn't call it clear, but it's not dark either. So fingers crossed that the fuel tank is still good. And all right, now let's move up to the clutch here. This is really kind of puzzling to me. From the minimal research I've done so far, I've learned that a lot of these tractors came with hand clutches, sort of like the old John Deere's. This one looks like it came with a factory foot clutch. Let's move around to the back. But somebody welded a bar onto it and turned it back into a hand clutch. And they've also got the mechanism rigged up to function so you don't push the clutch forward like you normally would with your foot. You grab the handle and you pull it back towards you. That engages the clutch. All right, coming around back here, the seat does fold up. This is the PTO lever, I think. These two handles here operate the hydraulics. I believe the right one, in this case the shorter one, I believe this operates the lift, and the left one I haven't figured out yet, so my guess is that that must operate some sort of a remote, like maybe right down there. Oh, it looks like there's one on both sides. Somebody did weld on a provision for a top link to make sort of a quasi 3-point out of the system just the way it is. So I'll probably experiment with that and see if I can hook up one of my implements to it. One of the proprietary things about the Case DC and whatever other tractors I use them on, they call these the eagle claw hitch. How these worked is you flipped up this lever here, these came forward, then you would drop your implement pins in here, and then you would just drive the tractor forward and it would lock it in. So I'll definitely be trying those out as well. It's got a super heavy duty drawbar. Looks like it could be an inch thick even, and it runs up there quite a ways underneath the tractor, just like the WD-45 does. It's got these big old plates on both sides for placing your feet. They're really thick and sturdy, and it's a really nice wide flat spot to put your feet. It has a 4-speed transmission with reverse, and it's got a pretty unique way of selecting the gears. For example, neutral is vertical. That is neutral. And then to select the gears, so reverse is on the top right, so you can push this up and to the right. That's reverse. And then you kick it back to the center for neutral. And then first is all the way down and on the right, so you push this all the way down and right to get first. So let's just say we want to engage second gear, for example. Let's pretend the tractor is running. You push it up and left to engage second, and then, in this case, grab the clutch and pull it towards you to engage the tractor. Nothing happens until you move the clutch. So what I'm saying is the tractor can be in gear while you're sitting there with it running, because it's disengaged until you pull it back to engage it. On the dash we have oil pressure, and then the white pull knob I believe is for the lights. We have a standard ammeter and a water temp gauge. That silver toggle switch there is for the magneto ignition on off, and that push button is to engage the starter. All right, coming around to the right side here, we've got 2 brakes, left and a right. We've got your standard belt pulley. Looks like we've got a fairly new solenoid in there with some fairly new wiring. Of course, we got the starter here. This is looks like the oil filter. You can see the oil fittings coming out of the block up to the filter, and this must go up to the gauge. We've got more inspection plates on this side of the oil pan, and then this tractor does not have a dipstick. It's just got these 2 check plugs. Although this has been converted to 12 volt with an alternator, this still has a magneto, and spark plug wires look semi-new to me. Can't really get a good look at the spark plugs yet, but this is clearly an overhead valve, and the valve cover is way up in there. So this is another one of those tractors where to get to the valves you have to remove the hood. And I forgot to show you, it's got kind of a unique throttle on it, but it's right here. So when you're sitting in the operator's position, you got to reach down with your hand to increase or decrease the throttle. This is, of course, the radiator cap. That's where you put the coolant. And I think that fin is actually a pretty cool design. And she is heavy. Probably cast iron, huh? Yep, it's got coolant and it's green. There are a couple wrinkles in the hood here and there, but overall the metal on this tractor is pretty straight. And I forgot to mention the rear tires, but they are also in pretty decent condition. These are definitely older than the front tires because there is some cracking starting to occur a little bit here and there, but that's really not that bad. And if you're asking yourself, why hasn't he cleaned that thing yet? Well, I actually have. That's how dirty it was when I got it. I sprayed it down with some soap and then I pressure washed the entire thing. I didn't get it perfectly clean, but I did get a couple layers of grime off of it. So I think it's clean enough to start working on anyway. So the tractor's been sitting here now for 4 days, and look at this board underneath it. I only see one tiny little drop of oil right there and nothing else whatsoever. Those little dark spots on the wood were there before. That's not from this tractor. And I think that's actually pretty remarkable because these old tractors usually tend to mark their territory much more than that. Yeah, she needs a little TLC, but the thing, in my opinion, she's like 95% complete. So, fingers crossed, we may have a good tractor to start with here. Despite the lousy weather today, I'm going to end this video with a startup attempt. I don't know about you guys, but I always enjoy the story of finding these tractors almost as much as the tractors themselves. I saw it was posted on Facebook Marketplace one morning when I get up pretty early, and I contacted the guy right away. Evidently, I was the first one to contact him. We arranged a time in the early afternoon for my wife and I to go out there and see it. We live in a small town out here, about 7,000 people, and they were even further out than we were. They're about another 25 minutes away from town. We were right on time, and they were there waiting for us, which was nice. They were farmers. They had quite a large piece of land out there, and their whole property was sort of on a hillside as it went up into the mountains. So after we arrived, they said, yeah, the tractor's here, and they pointed to a lean-to up this muddy road about, maybe 200 yards. So we walked up there, took a look at the tractor, and right off the bat, I saw no red flags. I checked the fluids, did sort of a standard inspection. I was able to actually reach in and turn the engine over by grabbing the fan blades and turning it over, and it spun real freely. No evidence of oil leaks on the ground beneath it. I had some fuel in the tank. The coolant was full and it was green. The folks that owned the property, they were very nice. There was an older woman, she's probably 70, maybe 75, and her son was there with her. He's probably about 40, I'm guessing. We learned during the course of the conversation that Dad was no longer around. Anyway, the story is that Dad used to use this case all the time out in the fields, and I guess when he got sick or when he passed, the tractor got put away. Hopefully they put it underneath a lean-to, so it was sort of out of the elements. But it had not been run in about 4 years, they said. When I messaged the son earlier that morning and arranged to come out and see it, I asked him, what's the story with the tractor? Because he didn't list anything in the description at all. And his message back was, it ran when parked a few years ago. So at the time, I didn't know if the guy was messing with me or if he was being honest, or you just never know until you get out there and see him. So I didn't ask him any more questions. I just said, okay, let's arrange a time to meet. So I brought my flatbed trailer with a winch on it. I had no intention of even trying to start the tractor on the property. I was just going to winch it on the trailer and say thank you very much. But because the tractor was under this lean-to, about 200 yards up this muddy hill, we've had a lot of snow and rain lately. As we were walking up there, I realized how muddy it actually was, and it was very thick and very sticky. I don't want to bring the truck and trailer up here, so we had a bit of a dilemma. So the son's solution was, well, let's just start it up and we'll drive it down the hill and put it on the trailer. I thought, yeah, sure, right. There's no way this thing is going to start up enough to be able to drive it. So he put a battery in it, but the battery was dead. Took that out, found another battery, it was dead also. Found another battery, number 3, it was dead also. Meanwhile, I'm thinking this is all futile because, what's a battery going to do if it doesn't have spark or compression or whatever the case may be? So he goes back down the hill one more time and actually removes the battery from his daily driver. I think it was a Dodge. I walked down there with him and we got it out of the truck, and then we walked back up the muddy hill. Again, I'm thinking this is all just a futile effort. It's not going to work. The battery's not going to help. It's not going to start. And evidently they didn't have any other tractors or big equipment left around to, tow the tractor out of the lean-to and down the hill, which would have been a good solution in my opinion. So we were sort of at a loss there. If the tractor was not going to run, I'm not going to drive my truck up the hill and risk getting stuck. And they didn't have anything to tow the tractor down with, so I was just about ready to say goodbye and thanks anyway and just leave the tractor there. Anyway, he puts the battery in the tractor and I turned the fuel on, found neutral, found the choke. It took just a minute to figure out where the ignition switch was because there's no key on it. It's actually a button. So I pushed the button and the motor immediately cranked over. The starter sounded really good. And I only cranked it over for 4 or 5 seconds. And right before I let off the button, the tractor made a couple of pops. And that in itself just completely surprised me. So great, right? It tried to fire up. I turned the choke off, just touched the button this time, and the engine fired up and started to idle and sounded great. So my mind is just sort of boggled at this point, and I'm in disbelief. But I'm sitting there in the seat of the tractor, it's running, and then I look down at the gauges, and it's got good oil pressure, and the ammeter even shows that it's charging the battery. It's got sort of a strange gear shift and clutch on this tractor. I'll show you that in a little bit. So it took me just a minute to figure that out, but I managed to find reverse and back it out of the lean-to. Then I put it in first gear, drove down that muddy hill, and loaded up on the trailer. By the time we got home, there was like a mini blizzard starting. The snow started coming down sideways. So I waited till the following morning, which is actually today, got it unloaded no problem, and here she sits. So that's the story. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I say, I always enjoy the stories and the adventures of just going to get these things. It's almost as fun as tinkering on the tractors themselves.